Welcome to Unschooling Conversations. Today I'm joined by Naomi Fisher, and in this episode we are going to talk about burnout, particularly relating to our children, or to your children. My name's Heidi Steel. I'm a former teacher and unschooling parent to 4 children who are happy living and learning as they go. I can't say school-age children anymore because some of them have aged out. I know. So I've been unschooling for over 14 years and blog regularly and organise coaching courses and mentoring services on unschooling at liveplaylearn.org. I'm also inviting folks to get involved with future podcasts by asking us questions on any unschooling topic that you would like me to delve further into, and you can do this by using the comments section or emailing me. Today I do have some questions from some listeners which I have for Naomi, but first I'm going to let Naomi introduce herself.
Hi, Heidi. It's really nice to be here. So I'm Naomi Fisher. I'm a clinical psychologist and I'm the author of several books about self-directed education, including Changing Our Minds and A Different Way to Learn. And I'm the mother of 2 who have never been to conventional school. We unschooled for a while and then they have been at various home ed communities. And at the moment they're at a democratic school in Devon. Not for very much longer because my eldest is finishing next week, and he will be going on to mainstream college in September. So we're just about to move on to a different stage of our lives. Yeah. And anything else you wanted me to say? Oh, and I've also written a book called The Teenager's Guide to Burnout, which is a self-help guide for teenagers who are burnt out by school, and about that recovery process, because I think something that I've just been asked more and more about over the last few years. More people seem to be reporting that their children are burnt out and their teens are burnt out, and people are really worried about it. And it seems like it's something that I'd say maybe mental health practitioners like myself have been a bit slow to catch up on. We haven't necessarily kind of applied that model of burnout to children and teenagers. It's been something that we previously would have thought about as only happening in adults.
Which is interesting because I'm going to ask you about, I'm going to ask you lots of things, but one of the things that listeners really wanted to know was like the signs of what burnout looks like in children. So before we get to a point where it's really obvious and it's having an obvious impact, are there any kind of
early warning signs?
Yeah.
So you mean actually if your child's still at school, maybe even, or are we just talking about children out of school?
I think so. A lot of the people I work with have deregistered as a result of their children obviously struggling with school and experiencing burnout. So let's think about that in school.
I think the number one early sign that would be kind of raising a red flag for me is when a child is losing interest in everything. So not just, it's normal for school children in particular, to have some things they're just like, I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in maths. I'm not interested in whatever else they're doing at school. But when it starts to be just, I'm not really interested. I don't really want to do even the things that previously they might have enjoyed. So things that, usually they would have been really enthusiastic about it. Now it's just kind of, I don't know. But it's not just about not doing things. It's about that lack of interest in stuff. I think when there's a kind of spark of curiosity, isn't there? Particularly in children under 12. I think it's a little bit harder with teenagers because they have a little bit more of a tendency to downplay their sparks of curiosity, particularly if they're at school. But I think when your child, say your 8 or 9-year-old, is saying, I'm just not really asking questions anymore, not really being curious about any things anymore, just kind of being like, yeah, okay, can we go home? That's when you might say, this just doesn't seem quite right. I think there's a kind of flatness. Parents say are often flatness, lost their spark, kind of just there's no light in their eyes anymore. They look like they're going
all
through
familiar
the motions.
Phrases. They're definitely things that I hear. That I hear a lot.
And sometimes parents will only really notice that looking backwards. So sometimes if your child has really gone into burnout and they're out of school and you're like, oh yeah, actually, the signs were quite obvious maybe a year ago, but I didn't really notice because I just thought, that's what you have to do. You just have to keep going to school. You just have to keep doing things. And I didn't really think, actually, I think it's something that we should really be quite worried about. If a child under about 12 doesn't have this kind of interest in anything. So I'm not saying they have to be interested in the stuff they do at school, but it's when they're not kind of being passionate and enthusiastic or curious about anything that you want to worry. Actually, you don't want to worry, do you? That's the wrong way of putting it. But
No.
whether you might start to think, I wonder if we can change something a bit here. Because actually, one of the things that I think can happen when people, so the road to burnout, I sort of talk about with children in particular, there are kind of two ways that I hear about, mostly from parents. One is a kind of slow, gradual decline, really, with things just getting less and less, the child getting less and less interested in stuff, everything getting harder. It's starting to feel like you're kind of wading through treacle. It feels like you're just pushing them to do everything all the time. It's like they're not doing things. There's no drive. The drive has gone. And for some parents, for some families, that's kind of slow decline. For others, things seem to be going fine. And usually the child is like doing loads of things, like it might be in several clubs and playing in the orchestra and playing musical instruments and doing sports clubs and all that kind of thing. And they're like this, often achieving really highly. And then something happens, bam, and it all falls apart. And it can be something that's quite minor. So it could be something like well, I suppose not quite minor isn't quite right, but I mean things like it could be something like a friend moving away, or it could be something like moving up a year to a class with a new teacher, or something that on the face of it isn't a really big isn't traumatic, isn't a really big event, but it's enough to kind of disrupt the balance. And then it's quite quickly, it's like the child just goes, I can't do this anymore. And things kind of go downhill really rapidly. And parents find that quite hard to understand because sometimes those children will stop going to school and very quickly they won't be getting dressed anymore. They might not be cleaning their teeth anymore. They don't want to go out the house. And you're like, but a month ago, I had a child who was never home because they were doing so much. And I think so I think those are the two main kind of entries into burnout that I hear about for children.
So what's actually going on when we say children are in burnout? Like what's going on for
So
them?
burnout, so the way that I would understand burnout is that it happens. So all of us go through life, okay? All of us go through life kind of managing our emotions and managing our life. And we all need more or less support to do that at different times in our lives. But if we're we all know what this feels like for ourselves. If we are managing life, we feel, we've got challenges there might be things that are tricky, but it's okay. We can manage the challenges and we might get really stressed about something, but we're able to kind of bring ourselves back to not being so stressed all the time. So I often use the analogy of a road. It's like you're driving along a road and, there might be obstacles in the road. You might even veer off the road at some point. But as long as you can get back onto that road and keep moving forwards, then things are okay. But if you're under chronic stress, then essentially you're off that road for long periods of time. So you might be driving along the side of the road on the kind of mud track for a long period of time, and you stop being able to get yourself back into that central zone, that zone where you're okay. And when you stop being able to bring yourself back, then it's a little bit more complicated than this, but basically, it's that not being able to bring yourself back, which leads you into burnout. So stress works that kind of, if you think about that, you're on this nice road where things are okay. Both sides of that road are usually kind of over arousal, overwhelm, like fight or flight response, or, doing loads and loads of things. Sometimes you might feel really efficient when you're in that place. You're in a kind of high level of stress. You might find trouble sleeping. You might be quite agitated. You might talk quite fast. You're kind of in this state of, go, 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 go. And then if you're in that state for too long, the next state after that is kind of shut down. It's like your body is just like, cannot keep this up for any longer, cannot manage this level of kind of adrenaline pumping through me for any longer. So you just kind of shut down and then you can't get back. So you're in this sort of state of shutdown where your body has basically gone too much. I say
So
to
you're
children and young people, it's just your body saying enough.
yeah, so
Stop,
like your body like forces you to
basically. Yeah.
recognize that this is not sustainable.
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And it might have felt quite sustainable before. You might be like, this is amazing. I can do so much stuff. And then suddenly you're like, Oh, actually, actually, I can't. And I think lots of adults do have that experience, at least at some points in our lives. I think it's a really common, when I talk to adults about burnout, most people have a time when they're like, oh yeah, that I can, that happened to me. And sometimes it will be a kind of really big event in somebody's life. I've often talked to teachers actually who'll say, I taught for 5 years and it was just this sort of really busy experience of never having a moment to stop. And then suddenly one day I just couldn't do it anymore. And I had this complete crash, and it basically resulted in me completely rethinking my entire career, my whole life. And I've ended up doing something completely different.
Are you curious about unschooling and want to know more? Perhaps you're on the edge of starting this adventure, or maybe you've been doing this a while, but you're looking for inspiration. After more than 13 years of unschooling 4 children and over 5 years supporting others on the same path, I have a vast library of resources that I'm happy to share with you for free, whatever stage of your journey you're in. You can check out the link in the description of the podcast, or you can head over to my website at liveplaylearn.org and look for the free resources tab. And there you will find lots of things to inspire you to keep living, learning and playing together. I said that the wrong way round, didn't I? Anyway, it's also a great way to make sure that you don't miss an episode of the podcast, which we will get back to now. Funnily enough, that was what I was thinking when you said most adults can think of a time, and I was thinking, oh yes, what I was teaching.
and in fact, if you think about it like that, you can think about it as actually quite a functional, useful response. Like I think we can sometimes get caught up in thinking that we shouldn't have these responses, that burnout isn't useful. But actually, I think burnout is a really natural response of our body saying, stop. This is not in this. You cannot carry on doing this. This is not enough. It's when you might have ignored that in yourself. You might have ignored those thoughts, pushed them to a side, or you're so busy you don't even have time to listen to those thoughts. And it's like your body going, nope, we have to rejig something here. We have to do a reset. And I think that's something we need. Lots of us need it. And lots of people, when they talk about it, will say, yes, that from that moment on, I've done so many different things, or I've really got in touch with what really matters to me. And I've realized that I was living a life that didn't work for me. And that's just a story I hear from so many people. I don't know if that represents the people that I talk to.
It poses the question, or it makes me reflect on something that I do get asked quite a lot, which is why. So we're talking about children in school and why it happens to some children and not others. So why is it that some children feel the pressure and the stress of a situation that actually their peers appear to be managing and don't experience it in the same way? So
we all experience things. We all experience the world differently. I mean, when you have 100, you have 300 children in a school, each of those children is actually going to have a different experience of that school. It's not the same. It is the same school, but it's not the same experience for them. And there's so many factors that go into that. There's obviously the individual child and how easy or difficult they find all the requirements of school. But there's also whether they meet a good friend, whether their good friend is around, whether they like the teacher, whether the teacher likes them, whether they like the classroom, how many children there are in their class. There are so many factors which make the experience of each child different. And I think there's also sort of life factors. So there's what that child has experienced in their life up to that point. And I do think that the experience of the COVID pandemic was probably something which made a lot of this current generation of children now more prone to high anxiety and perhaps more prone to burnout as well. So each child is bringing, the way I think about it is each child is bringing their individual temperament, their individual differences. Then they're also bringing all of their life experiences, and then they're bringing that to the environment, to the school. And those three things all come together, and then that their response is whatever it is. But it can also, when I was saying that something can happen, that's just like luck of the draw sometimes, whether those things happen or not, aren't they? There's like, if you talk to people who've kind of managed to keep going through school and it's been kind of okay, and then they're looking at their child now and thinking, oh, I'm a lot like my child, how come I got through it and they're not getting through it. It can often simply be things like you were lucky that you had a really good friend who was a kind of supportive factor for you at school, and that good friend didn't leave. Or you were lucky that your path through your school meant that you ended up with lots of teachers who liked you and who you connected with and made you feel good. It's a lot of it is down to luck, just as to what your individual journey has ended up being.
Yeah, I say things similar about it being really related to the individuality of children, the environment, things that are happening on it in their lives, their home
Yeah.
lives. All those things can contribute, and then how they feel and respond um,
And also, actually, can I
themselves.
say one other thing about that is I think about burnout as something that happens when the demands and expectations of the environment exceed the capacity of the person to cope. So exceed the capacity of the child or the adult to cope. And that happens to different people at different stages in their lives. And we know that. We know, for example, that transition from primary school to secondary school is it's a big step up for all children, and some children will find that challenging, and they will exceed their capacity to cope at that point in their lives. Some children appear to get through the whole of school okay because they've managed to balance those things, but then the transition to sixth form college is too much, or the transition to university, or the transition maybe if they try and leave home. There are we have terms like quarter life crisis or midlife crisis for a reason. And I think this is just a kind of recognition of the fact often we get certain points in our lives and we're like, what is going on? This is not what I was signed up for. Or, actually, I can't cope with what's being expected of me right now. So I think just because, so some children might do that at 6, other children at 11, others at 16, others might go the whole way through. And I've worked with quite a lot of adults who've gone through the whole school system, apparently done well, gone through university, kind of launched themselves, and then they get to about 30 and they're kind of like, I can't go on anymore. So,
And of course, as
yeah,
adults, frequently, not always, but frequently as adults, we have more control over that and more awareness.
yes.
So we as adults can actually bring in services like yourself, or go and ask for
Yeah.
help, and
Or have a
children don't
break.
have, or have a break,
We
or
don't
change
allow children
direction,
to have a
or go on
break in
holiday.
no,
Children
exactly.
don't always
That
have,
they don't have those
they
options.
aren't able to articulate, or they don't realize there are those options, or they aren't able to express what it is that they're feeling in those terms. So they
And there's a
yeah,
really
I've never
strong
thought about that
focus
before.
on children with pushing them on. So
Mm-hmm.
I often say it's like with adults, if you are feeling really like you just don't want to do your work anymore, you have got options. You can look for a different job. Sometimes people will take a sabbatical. Sometimes people will save up and will decide to go traveling for 6 months. Those are all kind of acceptable things to do. Or actually, this is slightly strange, but for lots of women, actually, you don't have a baby with this in mind, but you have a baby and you take that maternity leave, and that provides a break in, not a break, but it provides a break from what you were doing before. It's something really different. And that is can be really useful. I think we all need those times in our lives, and we absolutely don't make any space for that with children. It's like there's no option. If they're showing signs that they need space or they need something different, the message is keep pushing them in, keep going. And I do think that keep making them go message is one of the reasons why so many more children and teenagers are now going into burnout, because what's happening is we have those early signs of distress, or early-ish signs of distress, where the child is saying they don't want to go to school, or the teenager is saying they don't want to go to school, or they're getting highly anxious about it. And all the message is so often you have to keep making them. And we wouldn't do that with an adult. If we had an adult who was really distressed at work, we would not say you must keep going under any, even if you're screaming and crying every morning, just keep going. We just wouldn't do that to them. And I
You'll
find
be
it
fine when you
strange.
get here. That's
Yes, exactly. You'll be fine when you're there. Just don't allow yourself to think about it.
Yeah.
We just don't do that. And I do
No.
think the repeated forcing in can be really damaging for some children. And it's really tricky for parents because parents are usually told you must force them in because if you don't, they'll get more anxious about school. The only way to make them less anxious at school is to keep making them go, which actually, as a psychologist, I know where that comes from. It comes from the idea that you become more anxious about something if you avoid it, which is true, right? So, like if you are if you have an irrational fear of something, like if you have been in a car accident and you're really scared of driving and you then avoid all cars, you probably will, your anxiety about cars will not dissipate. You won't get less anxious about cars through avoiding them. But if your anxiety is not irrational, so in other words, if you don't like school because school makes you really miserable, or if you don't like school because you're being bullied, then making you go repeatedly will actually increase your anxiety about it rather than decreasing your anxiety about it because the reason you're anxious, you are rationally anxious. You don't want to go because you don't like being there. And that's quite different to a kind of irrational anxiety about something.
Let's talk about recovery
Hmm.
because we need the hope that it's not forever.
Absolutely.
And it's not forever. So the two things that the two questions that came up from listeners were really focused about what can I do as a parent to help,
Hmm.
and I will do them separately, but also what recovery looks like. How do I? It's kind of like how do I know it's working? How do I know I'm doing the right
Yeah.
thing? What will change for my child? What will how
Yeah.
will it get better? So should we start with what parents can do?
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
think the number one thing that you can do if your child has stopped going to school because they're burnt out is to make it clear to them that you're not going to start forcing them back into school once they get better. Because I think the number one thing that blocks children from getting better, and I don't think this is conscious at all, is that you can't really get better if you know that the result of getting better will be that you have to go back into the environment which made you ill in the first place. You're in a catch-22 situation, basically. So I think parents have to be prepared to say, we are not going to do that again. We're not going to make you go. And if you want to go back to school, that's okay, but that's when you want to go. We are not going to make you. That's really tough for parents because they'll be being told by everybody else, you absolutely can't do that. You must make them go. They might be being fined. There's, all sorts of societal pressures that make that really difficult. But I do think if you're in a situation where your child knows that the moment there's any sort of hint of recovery, it'll be back to school, then you're going to be stuck and they're going to be stuck as well. So I suppose associated with that is kind of, I think the role of the parent is to try and lift off the pressure from the child. So therefore, basically not doing, let's get you up every morning and see if you're ready, if you want to go to school today, see if you're feeling better, see if you're ready to do things. Trying to stop other people putting pressure on. So relatives who might come around and say, oh, when are you going
That's
to get back
probably
to
trickier,
school?
isn't it?
Really tricky. I
I
think you
mean,
have to be
actually
upfront.
reigning in your
Yes.
own kind of
Reining
need
in
to
your
say,
own
"Are you ready?
anxiety.
Let's do
Yeah.
a thing. Let's get." That's actually quite tricky. So
It's
I
really
will name
difficult.
that, but
Yeah.
actually trying to also create a boundary with
Yeah.
other
Create kind of a barrier
influences.
around saying
Yeah.
yes. And I think you need to probably as a parent, you need to find somewhere to express your anxieties away from your child. Someone else to go and go, oh my God, this is really difficult. I think that the parents I've talked to have really come through it. They say that's been absolutely essential, having someone out of the out of the earshot of the child for sure, where you can cry about it, where you can express how difficult it is, because you're going to be holding an enormous amount of emotion and worry, and anything you can do to avoid projecting that onto your child will make things easier in the long run. Because I often say you can't make someone feel less pressured by adding pressure, even though we're all told that that's what you should do with children. We're all told, you should say things like, oh, aren't you worried you're going to get behind? Or what about your GCSEs? All that kind of thing. All of that is going to make that child feel worse and that will make them more stuck. rather than less stuck. So the first step is just lift off the pressure. Let's see if we can try and create a bit of a cocoon here where we're saying we're going to give you a bit of space to recover. We're not going to push you back into school. And then the next stage is repairing the relationship with your child. So particularly if your child's been at school, then it's very likely that you are the one who has made them go to school, but also that you have in lots of ways taken the side of the school, because parents are encouraged to do that with their children. So, if your child complains about school, you might have been saying, it's not that bad, things could be worse. Or you like this, this is good. And for a while, you might just going to need to listen to all the negativity, even though you know that it wasn't all negative, but just letting them vent about it, just letting them talk about it, and then joining them in doing the things that they enjoy. And that means probably video games or watching YouTube or doing the things that you as a parent might think are a waste of time, but doing them with the child. Because often when I talk to parents, they'll say, I make suggestions. I'd love them to come and join me for a walk. I'd love them to come up, but they just say, no, 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 no. And I think when we're doing that, it's like we are expecting them to come and join us. And actually, at this point, we need to be going to join them where they are. And sometimes I've talked to parents for whom that is actually sitting outside their room
I
and
was just
just being
thinking that.
available.
Available
If they're
and
closed,
there.
it's just showing
Yeah.
that you're available. Because sometimes parents are like, if we're not doing anything together, I'll go off and do my stuff or get on with cleaning the kitchen or get on with all the other tasks that I've got to do. But actually just being available is a really powerful thing to show your child. You're basically showing them, I'm here and I'm listening and I can listen to you, even if you don't want to talk to me, which
Yes.
is
Yeah.
I'm still here, and I still care about you. So that's kind of relationship repair. And then I think there's a kind of trying to bring in things to your home that make life a bit more interesting, a little bit more stimulating. And I think this is easier if you have other children because they tend to bring in things that are more interesting, variety. If it's only you and a child, maybe if you're a single parent, then you probably need to think quite proactively about is stuff coming into our home, is there stuff to be interested in, even if they're not interested right now, is there something that might just be different? Or it's even things parents tell me about, things like ordering those little Japanese boxes, those little boxes where you like mix up little pastes and make little sets of burgers and things. Did you ever do those? No?
Oh,
Oh, you
no.
missed out.
I
Okay.
have.
I think we did those from some YouTube video, but there used to be these little packets of strange Japanese sweets where you have little powders and you mix them up and then you make little models of things like they're quite strange. But anyway, things like that, things that just come into your house and are kind of a bit curious and a little bit interesting, and then you could just leave lying around. And so there's something different to see. Or even it can be even things like just sometimes moving the chairs around in the front room or
Yeah.
rearranging stuff a bit. So, or getting a
Yeah.
pet. So,
Or
so
suggesting you're going to clear something out. That usually
Oh,
means
that
children
usually
go,
gets.
oh, no, don't.
I
I
want to
want to
keep
keep
it.
that thing I
Yes.
haven't seen for 6 years
Yes.
at the back of the
That's
cupboard.
often really good. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but things like that, so that you're thinking, because often what happens is they're in burnout, they're in quite a kind of flat, slow state, and that's okay for a while. They're recovering, but you want there to be things for them to be interested in when they start to be interested in the things again, and in a non-demanding way and in a non-schooly way, because often parents really want to skip to the stage where their child's like, I'd really like to do some maths, and or I'd really love to read a book, and actually that's quite a long way off in my experience. And what's happening at this sort of middle stage is you're just looking to rekindle those sparks. So remember, right at the beginning I talked about the sparks have gone. That's the thing about burnout, there aren't those kind of sparks anymore. So you're just trying to give those little sparks a little bit of attention, a little bit of air, so that they can develop. And it can be about anything. It can be about a video game, or it can be about cooking cupcakes, or it can be about fancy dress or stage makeup or whatever. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it is. It's the interest that you're looking for, that little spark of interest.
So this is the part where I'm going to tell you about the Unschooling Village Hub. I wonder if that's something that you've heard of yet. It's a membership group I run for community, but also inspiration and peer support. Members get access to regular teaching and coaching workshops, self-care sessions, because taking care of you is really vitally important to your unschooling, and lots of practical resources for unschooling in your family. It's packed with value, events and compassion. The best bit is it's only £20 a month with no ongoing contract. You can simply stay as long as you need us. You can find out more by checking out the link in the podcast description or heading over to the website liveplaylearn.org and sign up there. And we very much look forward to welcoming you into the Unschooling Village Hub. We're here for you wherever you are on your unschooling journey. And now, more from the podcast. I was thinking as well, though, that when children do show that spark of curiosity, there is kind of a tightrope, I think, a balance between having those things available and allowing them to engage with them in ways that they feel comfortable with, and us not jumping on it as like a this is amazing, we're gonna do this every day.
Definitely don't do that.
Like over enthusiasm on
that'll squash the little green shoots. You want the little green shoots, and you want to just be able to say, oh yeah, and that's it. And not to get too excited about it, because often what happens is there'll be a little green shoot and then you'll have a few days without any green shoots, and then there might be another one, and it's a slow,
or be excited, but
process.
Like you said about sharing your anxiety and your stress and your with other people,
it's okay to be excited,
be excited
elsewhere.
With them, like this happened, exactly. This is amazing, I've seen this. It's and go and
write it down too for yourself. I think it's really helpful sometimes for parents to keep a note of these things, because it's really easy to not see the progress. Like often when I'm working with families, they'll tell me about something their child's done, and I'm like, wow, I thought your child wasn't leaving their room. And it will turn out that actually the change has been so gradual that they've hardly noticed, and you just kind of get used to it. And it's really helpful to be writing down, not much, but just noting down what they're doing, so then you can look back and go, oh yeah, maybe this time last year we weren't really doing anything, and now we're actually doing this and this and this, and maybe we'll be able to do these things in the future. It kind of can make you feel more hopeful, at least when things start to change. But also, I think you're right about the green shoots. You don't want to squash them, and you don't want to catastrophize if there's a green shoot and then there's nothing for a long time. It still was worth it. It was still good, and it's still progress. And, there will be progress over time. If you can, I think the key thing that makes the difference with progress over time is the parents being able to keep that kind of low pressure, but with opportunities position.
Yeah. I went to talking about time. I mean, people always want to know how long it takes. And
no way of knowing.
I know that's the answer, but they need to hear you say it, Naomi.
Yeah. So, I mean, for some people it can be weeks, for some it's months, and for some it's years. And I think if your child is sort of stuck in the most extreme form of burnout, and it's been going on for a year or maybe even 6 months or more, then I think you probably want to be thinking about, is there something here which is blocking them from being able to come out again, to be able to kind of start emerging again? Because there can sometimes be. So it can be, for example, if the child actually feels under a lot of pressure, or if the child is worried that if they start getting better, they're going to have to go back to school, that's a block. And then you might find that child doesn't recover because they can't. Or if every time a child comes out of their room, they're kind of greeted with sort of eye rolls, or, if they feel criticized, then again, that could be something which can actually block them from starting to emerge. So I'd say if you don't see any signs of progress, after about 6 months, then I would definitely I would perhaps consult somebody, but I would also just be thinking about, is it really possible for them to come out? Or have we all, because what can happen sometimes is that everybody sort of gets to this stable position, which isn't really a happy position, isn't really, it's not a good position, but it's just kind of how things are. So, everybody expects it to be how things are. So, for example, with teenagers, what can happen is if a teenager is like really retreating, going to the bedroom, doesn't come out, everybody organizes their life around the fact that this teenager is essentially absent from the family, isn't really, that, and there's no, so parents might both be working full time, for example. So the child's at home alone all day because, they're not doing anything. But then it's very hard for that to change because what does the child come out to now? They come out to an empty house. And how are we going to move that? Do you know what I mean? You need to be thinking proactively as a parent as what is the next step from this? And how can I make it open? How can I make sure it's there for them to step into? How can I make sure it's as easy as possible for them to step into things being a little bit different? So, for example, in that case, because I do meet a lot of parents who are like, we can't, we have to keep working. We don't know what to do. So I would say in that case, it's about thinking, are there other people you could bring in who could come and spend a bit of time in the house, even if your child's at home alone, at home shut in their room? That's the thing. I think it's easy to say, well, they're just shut in their room anyway. So so what's the point? But there is a point because it makes a big difference knowing that there are other people around who are interested, who are available if you want to go and find them. Yeah.
So I definitely would like to end on like recovery is possible. Like this isn't a permanent state. What do you think it looks like for children when I'm going to say have recovered, but kind of start coming out the other end, and those green shoots maybe become
trees, they
more than
become
green shoots.
bushes and trees. Yes.
What does that look like?
Yeah, so it starts to look like an interest in the world, really. It starts to look like they've kind of regained that curiosity about the world. They're looking for connection with other people. They are on their own terms, yeah. So this might, doesn't mean that they're going to become a different person to the person they were before. It just means that they are looking for they're kind of out, they're open to opportunities in a way which when I think they're in burnout, they're closed down. They're not looking for things to happen really because they're just shut down. So there can sometimes be a stage, if you think about those bits of the road that I talked about, sometimes as children come out of burnout, there's actually quite a kind of sort of angry stage. And sometimes that catches parents unawares because they've been quite flat, quite passive. And now suddenly they're angry and agitated. And it's their nervous system kind of coming back to that state of aliveness again. And also sometimes it can be feeling these feelings which have been quite shut down for a long time. So when you're in burnout, you can be often quite numb. And now suddenly you might be really angry with, what happened when you were last at school or what happened with your parents. And it takes parents by surprise because they're like, well, this is a year ago now. I thought we dealt with this, but actually it's like now we can really feel the emotions. Now we can really talk about what happened. So that's actually a sign of recovery, even though it may feel like a sign of having gone backwards. So yeah, anger and maybe being a bit more conflictual, maybe being a bit more difficult to manage, actually could all, being kind of less shut down, less flat. So there's that kind of stage. But then yes, what recovery really looks like is when a child has got that spark back, when they have a sense of themselves as a person who can make things happen and who wants to make things happen. And also they have a sense of themselves as a person in the world who is kind of connected to can be connected to other people in the world. And they start asking questions or they start wanting to do things. So they start saying things like, I'd like to, could we go and do this? Why does this happen? And those are the things which kind of start you off down the whole rabbit hole of learning, aren't they, really, of unschooling and learning. And I think when you talk to parents, they know when that's happened, even though they can't necessarily predict what it'll be like. They're like, yes, I can feel that we're recovered now. But it doesn't mean that they are necessarily back to what they were. And because of course what they were was kind of what happened when they were going into burnout. And so it may be that, like with adults, that when children come out of burnout, they might not want to do things which previously they spent all their time doing, for example, because they might be like, actually, you know what? It wasn't fun anymore. I used to enjoy it, but it's not fun anymore. I don't want to anymore play my musical instrument or do loads of physics or whatever it was that they used to do. And parents sometimes feel that as a loss, but I think it's better not to think about it as a loss and think about it more like a kind of evolution that they're reconnecting with different bits of themselves. And I think it's really useful. I think that's the other thing. I think when you talk to young people who've been through this, when I've talked to like older young adults who've been through this as teenagers, they will say that when they got to college or to university, they may have got there later than other people. They might have gone quite a circuitous route, but that they had much more of a sense of themselves and why they were there and why they wanted to do it than their peers did who hadn't gone through that. So I think it's helpful to have a sort of positive reframing on it as well, that this is almost like a stage of recalibration. I like the sort of imagery of a phoenix or something, it's like we've had to lay waste to everything. We've had to burn everything in order to come out as something new. But that something new is really precious and important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think about particularly unschooling families that go through it, they have a really unique opportunity to do that healing work and to go through that process without always thinking, the expectation is my child will go back to school, without that being there constantly. I see in families that I work with the difference that piece makes. And it's a really good thing that they have or can provide the time to help their children through recovery and do that recalibration. I like recalibration. It's not easy, and it is difficult to as a parent to watch your child go through anything that's unpleasant, but there is a kind of an end point. There is a recovery which will come.
And it's one of those things, a bit like learning to read, that it's very hard to have confidence in it when it's your child and the first time. But as you can see other people go through the process, and you can gain confidence that this is a process which can happen. And that's so important, I think, as a parent, to have this confidence that this is a process that has a rhythm of its own and has a progression and is moving somewhere, even when it feels like it isn't. And I think you can gain that from hearing about others, really, from hearing from others who've been through it and who are a few years further on.
Yeah. And of course, when people are in the school system as well, children in the school system, everything has to be monitored and often done in 6-week blocks. This is our target for the next 6 weeks. This is the thing. So there's always this constant moving and this constant idea that things have to be going
constant linear progress.
And actually at speed. There's always this drive. Whereas this is a little bit slower, I think. A lot slower.
Yes. And I think when your child goes through this, you learn that this illusion of linear progress is just that. It's an illusion, because often what will happen is children. I was talking to a parent recently whose child been out of school for 3 or 4 years, and then she went back into school, and she was like, it's really weird because she's missed all these years, but she's not behind. How does that work? Because they tell you so much that you'll be behind. It turns out that actually growing up is a lot of what's happening. I think growing up and just living in the world and being interested in things, you learn an awful lot through doing that. You don't need to put in all those years. They will not. Yes, it's not going to be the end of the world if they miss a couple of years of school. The likelihood is they'll be able to catch up. And even if they do things at a different time scale, that is absolutely fine. They don't have to do things at the same rate as everybody else.
Yeah, fabulous. I'm going to say thank you very much for coming and sharing about burnout. It's definitely something that people I work with have raised and we talk about quite a lot. So if people are looking for a community of people that understand what burnout looks like in families, and they want to come and share those green shoots and anxieties and worries with other people, you would be very welcome to come